Imagine a burly figure with a sloping forehead, receding chin, hunched shoulders, and a club clenched in hand, wandering through deep forests, growling, and living by instinct. That's the image popular culture has fed us about the Neanderthal for decades. A wild creature, pre-human, crude, more beast than man. But if you still believe that, it's time to let go of the myth, because modern science has rewritten the story, and what emerges now is not a prehistoric brute, but a close relative, a branch of our own human family. Neanderthals had intelligence, organization, culture, and even heart. At archaeological sites like Shanidar, La Chapelle aux Saints, and El Cedron, researchers have uncovered stunning evidence. Traces of the dead, buried with flowers and personal objects, animal bones sorted and processed methodically. They didn't just survive, they thought, they collaborated, and perhaps they loved. Some cave paintings, once believed to be the exclusive work of Homo sapiens, are now thought to possibly have been created by Neanderthals themselves. They knew how to use pigments, craft jewelry, and light up darkness with fire and imagination. And when we examine their skulls, jaws, and bone marrow more closely, what we find is not brutality, but humanity. A form of life that once existed independently and then slowly melted into ours. Neanderthals were not others. They were us, just in a different form. Part 2. Neanderthal DNA in modern human blood. You may have never heard the roar of a saber-toothed tiger or walked barefoot across a frozen tundra, but within you, a part of that ancient world still lives on, silently, persistently, in your very flesh and blood. Today, if you are of European or Asian descent, about 1 to 2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. It's not a random quirk. It's not an evolutionary accident. It is the lingering trace of a time when flesh and fate collided, when two different human species, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, met and did more than fight. Around 60,000 years ago, modern humans left Africa for the first time. They entered the icy forests of Europe, territory where Neanderthals had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Two worlds collided. At first, perhaps with suspicion, rivalry, conflict, but also curiosity, a strange look, a wordless closeness between two unfamiliar beings. In the depths of a freezing winter, when death lurked behind every storm, life sometimes emerged in the most unlikely of places. A night of shelter, a shared meal, a relationship that crossed species, and then a child was born, carrying both bloodlines. Neanderthals didn't leave behind cities or writing, but they left something far more enduring, a genetic legacy, something you carry in every cell of your body. In contrast, modern Africans, whose ancestors never passed through Neanderthal territory, bear almost none of this trace. History isn't written only in stone and bone. It's also etched in silent genetic code, hidden deep within our DNA. And the Neanderthal part of you is still whispering, telling a forgotten chapter of our human story. Part 3. Hybrid Children, Bridging Two Worlds. In Peștera cu Oase, Romania, literally the Cave of Bones, scientists discovered a human jawbone containing up to 9% Neanderthal DNA. That's far too high to be a distant trace. It is solid evidence of a very recent Neanderthal ancestor, perhaps a grandfather or even a father. If we could reconstruct that hybrid child, they might have the height and quick stride of a Homo sapiens, but a broad face, sloping forehead, and strong jaw, classic Neanderthal features, carrying the legacy of two species and 1,000 unanswered questions. Was this child raised among Homo sapiens or left behind in a Neanderthal cave? Were they loved like any other child or forced to grow up, caught between two worlds, never truly belonging to either? We don't know the story of that child's life, but we do know one thing: they weren't alone. The presence of Neanderthal genes in billions of modern humans proves it. Hybrid children existed, survived, and passed on their legacy. A reminder that humanity was not born from a single line, but from many threads, braided, woven, tangled together. to create the species we are still becoming. Part 4. Genetic Legacy. From hair to immunity. You look in the mirror each morning and notice a stubborn curl sticking up at the back of your neck. You sneeze violently whenever the seasons change. You hike at high altitudes and breathe easier than most, or perhaps the opposite, getting dizzy without explanation. It might seem random, but perhaps that's the Neanderthal inside you whispering from deep within your cells. Though Neanderthal DNA makes up only 1 to 2% of our genome, its effects on the modern human body are significant, and not just in genetic terms, but in things you experience every day. They left us genes tied to physical appearance. Hair color, brown, red, even blonde, may partially trace back to them. Hair texture, whether your hair curls or falls flat, can also be influenced by Neanderthal DNA. Body shape, some genes affect height, bone density, and muscle mass. Even your sensitivity to smell, like detecting wood smoke from afar or being overwhelmed by strong perfume, might come from ancient adaptations to icy cave life. But the biggest impact lies in our immune system. Neanderthals lived for hundreds of thousands of years in harsh environments. Cold, dark, filled with wild animals and unfamiliar pathogens. To survive, they evolved robust genetic defenses. When they interbred with Homo sapiens, some of those defensive traits passed on to us, helping us fight bacteria, viruses, and adapt to hostile climates. Yet, everything comes with a price. Some of the same genes that once helped Neanderthals survive now increase our risk of type 2 diabetes, allergies, immune disorders, depression, and even autoimmune diseases. Incredibly, one Neanderthal gene variant helps some modern groups, like the Tibetans, adapt to extreme altitudes. While others get dizzy and breathless, they remain strong. It's not a miracle, it's the result of ancient interbreeding that shaped human biology. Neanderthal legacy isn't locked away in a museum. It's inside you, in every living cell. And even if it's just a tiny percentage, it might help determine who you are, how you live, and how you survive in this world. Part 5. A kiss from the past. When Neanderthals grew close to us. Not all archaeological evidence comes in the form of bones. Sometimes, all it takes is a single tooth to reshape how we view an entire culture. In El Cedron Cave, northern Spain, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a small group of Neanderthals, among the last survivors before their kind vanished. Among the bones was one tooth that stunned the scientific world, not because of its shape, but because of what lay hidden within its ancient plaque. Buried deep in hardened tartar, researchers discovered traces of Methanobrevibacter oralis, a bacterium still found in modern human mouths today. But this wasn't coincidence. This microbe, long thought to be exclusive to Homo sapiens, was living in the mouth of a Neanderthal over 120,000 years ago. How did a human-specific bacterium end up in their mouths? The answer, surprisingly romantic, lies in intimate contact. This bacterium can't spread through the air. It can only be transmitted through shared food, shared drinks, or a kiss. There must have been a degree of trust, of closeness, for this microbe to leap from Homo sapiens to Neanderthals. And that doesn't happen through violence or war. It happens when two individuals, even from different species, spend enough time together to share microbes. Part 6. The price of intimacy. Diseases passed along with desire. Love can cross all boundaries, even the boundary between two different human species. But, along with genetic legacy, emotion, and touch, there was something else silently exchanged through skin-to-skin contact: disease. One of the clearest examples is the story of HPV, human papillomavirus. This sexually transmitted virus still exists today and is responsible for various diseases, from genital warts to cervical cancer. Genetic studies reveal that modern humans with Neanderthal DNA, particularly in Europe and Asia, tend to carry the more common HPV-A strain. Meanwhile, people of African descent who do not carry Neanderthal DNA, tend to carry HPV types B and C. This strange distribution isn't random. Scientists have traced the evolutionary trail of the virus and found that HPV-A likely began spreading during the period when Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa and encountered Neanderthals in Europe and Asia. The virus may have existed in Neanderthals first, passed to modern humans through sexual contact. Or perhaps it happened the other way around. What's certain is this: it wasn't a one-time event. Genetic evidence shows repeated transmission, indicating that sexual encounters between the two species were far from rare. They happened often enough for the virus to take root and survive until today. Viruses don't care about species lines. They don't need language. They just need contact. And in the most intimate, vulnerable moments between two ancient people, the virus passed, along with DNA, with hope and with risk. Among the things we inherited from Neanderthals are many beautiful traits: adaptation, resilience, immunity. But there's a price too. Diseases we're still battling today. Genetics is a gamble, and in that game, love isn't always the reward. Sometimes it leaves behind a consequence. Part 7. Ancient Families. Isotope analysis of Neanderthal teeth and bones reveals that their infants were breastfed until about 9 months old and weaned around 13 to 14 months, much like in many modern societies. This reflects a long-term model of care, not just survival instinct, but nurturing. Even more striking, genetic data points to an unexpected pattern: older women having children with younger men. A reality that defies modern assumptions. Perhaps back then, attraction was not about age, but wisdom, skill, and compassion. In Neanderthal society, there were no houses, but there were homes, places where people returned at the end of a long, cold day. They made tools together, braided rope, sewed animal hides. When someone fell ill, they were cared for. When someone broke a bone, they were helped back up. This wasn't just instinct. It was cooperation born of something deeply human, empathy. And then there were the bracelets made from animal bones, necklaces strung with teeth, pierced seashells buried beside the dead. Not for trade, not for survival, but as gifts, as symbols of feeling, perhaps love, perhaps farewell. Part 8. When they vanished and melted into our blood. There was no thunder to mark the end, no catastrophe struck from the sky. The Neanderthals did not vanish overnight. They faded, like ice melting after the last long winter. Around 40,000 years ago, the skies over Europe grew colder. Winters lengthened. The great herds of reindeer began to thin out. Food grew scarce. Small Neanderthal groups, once masters of caves and valleys, began to weaken. They didn't fall because they were ignorant. They weren't defeated because they were savage. They simply weren't enough. Isolation led to inbreeding, when cousins, uncles, and distant kin had to bear children together, for there were no others. Those children were more fragile, more prone to illness, and less able to survive a world growing more brutal by the year. But the Neanderthals didn't all die. They dissolved. Through encounters with Homo sapiens, they left behind parts of themselves in someone else's blood. Every time two individuals came together, every child born between species carried a piece of Neanderthal forward. A genetic letter with no return address, sent across time and space to arrive in you. They didn't vanish like dust. They poured into the human ocean like a drop of water. No longer a separate species, yet still here, in bones, in genes, in the tiniest parts of what makes us whole. We are not only the descendants of Homo sapiens. We are a fusion, a genetic memory, a living continuation of stories left unfinished. If this journey moved you, if you believe their legacy deserves to be remembered, if you want to keep exploring the stories that were never written down, subscribe. Join us in reigniting the past with the knowledge of the present, and perhaps one day, you will be the one who tells the dreams they never got to finish.